All right, good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to the ACF committee meeting. And the way they're proceeding, I'm Jim Dill, I'm the Senate Chair. And the way the meeting is going to go today, first thing we're going to do is go around and introduce ourselves, the committee members. And then we'll take a short break and we'll all end up going to separate rooms with the exception of Senator Black, Representative Kinney, and Representative Hickman, who will remain in this room. The rest will all go to other rooms and Zoom in. So that'll take us a few minutes just to get that all set up. Then we have two presentations. The first one will be from Commissioner of DAF, Commissioner Beal, and she will make her presentation. And I think what we'll do is go ahead and ask her any questions then of her. And then when we're done with her, approximately done with her with the questioning, then we'll go over to Dean Carter, and she'll have a brief presentation on extension and what they have been doing to help out agriculture in the state. And we can ask any questions of her also. And she can also explain the subcommittee that she's on for the governor's task force. So with that, I will start with Representative Kinney.
Good morning. I am Representative Mary Ann Kinney. I represent the House District 99 in Western Waldo County.
Good morning. I'm Senator Bill Diamond. I live in Windham, and my Senate District 26. I have towns that literally circle Sebago Lake, and one town in the middle of the lake, Fry Island.
Representative Kryzak.
Good morning. I'm Ted Kryzak. I represent District 20, Acton, Lebanon, and part of Shapley.
Yes, good morning. I'm Representative David McRae. I represent District 148, and I'm down here for the meeting, but mainly to get out of the county.
Randy, I'll tell you do last.
Good morning, Representative Randy Hall from District 114 from Wilton and Southern Franklin County.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Tom Schofield. I represent House District 112. I live in the town of Weld, and I represent 17 towns and townships in Franklin and Somerset counties.
Good morning, Senator Black from Franklin County. I live in Wilton and represent all of Franklin County and 4 towns of Kennebec, Belgrade, Mount Vernon, Vienna, and Fayette.
My name is Bill Pluker. I come from Warren. I also represent Hope, Appleton, and part of Union.
My name is Chloe Maxman. I represent District 88, Chelsea, Whitefield, Jefferson, and half of Noblesboro.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Hickman. I'm your House Chair. I represent District 81, Winthrop, Reedfield, and a part of North Monmouth at the foot of Mount Pisgah.
And again, good morning. I'm Jim Dill. I represent Senate District number 5, which is Northern Penobscot County, beginning in Vesey, going up I-95 and ending in Millinocket. And so with that, since we've all introduced ourselves, we'll take just a quick break. And everybody has, I believe, their room assignments, knows where they're going to. And we'll take a short break. Thank you all. Yep. We're still having a little technical difficulty. We'll be another couple minutes before we get going.
What are they doing?
I don't think anybody is saying anything.
I can hear you. You want your mic on?
Yeah. There. I got that part out.
Yes, I have you, but I don't believe you.
I've got my mute off and my speaker on.
But I can hear you on my phone.
Right.
But you said your mic is off?
I'm not muted.
All right, so again, the first thing I would ask is everybody to mute their computers or phones, whatever they're using. And folks here in the room, we will be using our microphones when we are ready to speak. And with that, I think it's time for, if I can see her, there she is up in the corner, the commissioner. So welcome, Commissioner.
I need to unmute. Thank you very much. So would you like me to just jump right in? Okay, I'm happy to do that. If it's okay with you, I would like to just give some opening remarks, and then we have sent some documents ahead to the committee that we can walk through. That will be the bulk of the briefing. And then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, or any questions that I haven't answered in the body of the briefing that I know came ahead of time. Some of those questions just didn't seem to quite fit in an overview, but I'm perfectly happy to address them on the other end. Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay.
Sure, let's go ahead, and then when we get done, what we'll do is, I think if there are any other questions or your presentation actually spawns any questions, we'll do that first, and then we'll go over to the dean. I think both of you are planning to be here the whole morning, so.
Yes, and I do have just a few closing remarks too, not very long at all. So whenever that feels appropriate is fine here. Great, thank you. So Senator Dill, Representative Hickman, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to brief you on the activities of the department in response to COVID-19, particularly as they pertain to our Bureau of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Resources, as you've requested. I am Amanda Beal. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Before I jump right into specifics related to agriculture, I would like to give you an overview of how COVID-19 has impacted our work overall, and also to point out some of the impacts to our other three bureaus, as I think it will help to provide additional context to how our work has been evolving, adapting, and moving forward over these past few months. First and foremost, I'd like to describe how the pandemic has altered the way in which we do our work, as I'm sure you can appreciate it because we're all on Zoom right now. So I want to do this so that you have a sense of some of the necessary changes that we have undertaken. And quite rapidly in mid-March, just as the legislature was wrapping up its work and vacating the State House for its own safety, we were undergoing a rapid transition from the majority of staff in the department working on-site to working remotely. As I'm sure you can imagine, this was a logistically intensive transition, as we had to rethink systems, policies, management techniques, avenues for communication, learn new technologies that we have since become very dependent on. Maybe some people have become proficient. I'm not sure that I'm one of them, and so much more. I'm happy to report that our staff have demonstrated their adaptability and resilience in extraordinary ways during this upheaval. And because of their passion for their work and the people we serve, they have continued to be highly productive and responsive, and they have continued to just show up every day and do great work. And I am so grateful for all of their efforts and the ways in which they have risen to this occasion over and over again. And through all of this, one of our primary goals has been to ensure that the services we provide are uninterrupted, despite the challenges we were facing. From our meat and poultry inspectors to forest health and monitoring, and to our communication staff and all of the other programs in between, we have been determined to keep doing the things that keep business operations flowing, like protecting the health and safety of our food, as well as keeping our forests healthy and making sure that information is being disseminated expeditiously about resources that can help our agriculture, conservation, and forestry stakeholders navigate through this challenging time. On a logistical front, now that as a whole state we are on a reopening path, we are in the process of working through preparing for the day when more staff will repopulate our buildings once again, and navigating concerns about what that will look like and on what timeline. Reversing the outflow from working outside of our offices is a whole other body of work, but again, we are committed to serving our stakeholders without disruption as we do this work in the background. At this time, I'd like to shift to talking about our other bureaus for just a few minutes before we turn our focus to the Bureau of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Resources. So for the Bureau of Resource Information and Land Use Planning, I'm happy to say that field programs are all underway in several regions of the state. We've modified protocols to address COVID-19 concerns, such as only allowing field personnel to travel to work separately so that they can maintain 6-foot distancing. Also, project schedules and localities have been adjusted to eliminate the need for remote camping by field crews at this time. The Land Use Planning Commission is holding remote meetings via Microsoft Teams and has successfully implemented protocols that support public participation. And similarly, the Land for Maine's Future Board have transitioned smoothly to holding their meetings as virtual Teams meetings. Regional offices of the Land Use Planning Commission have implemented protocols that maintain public services and allow necessary public interactions while limiting potential exposure. For the Bureau of Parks and Lands, as you probably know, 10 coastal beach state parks were closed in April and May because of heavy use and public safety concerns, particularly at a time of year when we are not at our top staff level because it was a bit off season for us. In addition, we've consistently been seeing extremely high levels of public use occurring at several parks and public land sites, including Tumbledown Mountain, Camden Hills State Park, the Sunrise and Newport Trails, and in remote campsites throughout the North Woods. There's a surge in people recreating outside, and some state parks that were open in May, we saw a 100% increase in use compared to May 2019. Numerous rescues have been required of unprepared hikers at Tumbledown Mountain and elsewhere. The Bureau of Parks and Lands has been working with the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, the Department of Economic and Community Development's Department of Outdoor Recreation, and conservation groups on Be Safe Outside messaging and trying to get the word out widely about how people can be safe in the outdoors and make good decisions. In order to reopen closed coastal parks, manage visitors in other parks, and prepare for the opening of campgrounds, all with an eye toward public and staff safety, BPL staff spent considerable time determining the needs for securing and implementing personal protection equipment, or PPE, as I'll refer to it from here on, and focusing on additional public safety and park protocols, which we've also made available to other parks in the state. This required retrofitting entrance stations, restrooms, and making sure that we had adequate amounts of PPE and cleaning supplies on hand. Parking has been limited at some popular coastal parks, and we have been using significant signage, social media, and traditional media to communicate park use guidelines. As of June 1, all state parks and public lands, including remote campsites and campgrounds, are currently open and are being managed in line with the travel and tourism guidelines in the governor's plan to restart Maine's economy and the more recent Keep Maine Healthy plan. And I will just say that because campgrounds did not open as planned in May, our administrative staff had a lot of work to do to process refunds for reservations prior to June 1, but I believe we've completed that at this point in time. Some state parks are experiencing challenges with hiring, with reduced qualified candidate pools or candidates declining because of COVID-19 concerns. And as reopening plans have progressed for the state, BPL staff have spent a significant amount of time navigating implementation strategies within the parks for 14-day quarantine requirements for out-of-state travelers, and more recently, the Keep Maine Healthy Plan alternatives to the quarantine requirement. Each shift in policy requires synchronizing with other departments, updating websites, communicating clearly with 200+ park staff, and being responsive to emails and phone calls from the public to answer any questions that arise. The Maine Conservation Corps, which brings in nearly 100 young people from across the country, is not able to feasibly operate their remote living and working field teams with physical distancing standards, and therefore most of the field teams were canceled for this year. However, there are still plans underway to execute some field projects through agreements with multiple nonprofits and municipalities across the state, including Katahdin Area Trails, Frenchman Bay Conservancy, Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust, the City of Portland, Town of Harpswell, and others. The Bureau expects that COVID-19 will impact annual timber revenues, which fund Bureau staff and our work on numerous public recreation and wildlife projects. Initial indications are at least a 20% drop in prices in the wood markets. Within the Bureau of Forestry, our district foresters have seen a marked increase in requests for visits to woodlots. As it turns out, with more landowners working from home, they are looking for more advice from the Maine Forest Service. Our entomologists, foresters, and other staff got creative and celebrated the Forest Help Trifecta, as we're calling it, online this year: Arbor Week, National Invasives Week, and Emerald Ash Borer Awareness Week. In addition to COVID-19 market disruptions, the explosion at the J Mill has been cause for increasing economic concern in the forestry sector. There is much anticipation about the mill getting up and running again. Forest rangers continue to support the State Emergency Operations Center at NEMA with incident management processes to provide multi-agency response during the pandemic. Rangers have also provided N95 fit testing to our sister natural resource agencies. Forest rangers are being leaned on more heavily because of a reduction of responding municipal firefighters due to virus concerns. And statewide, to date, forest rangers have responded to 621 fires, representing 724 acres, the second highest fire count in 10 years, and it's only June. So far, there's been a 170% increase in wildfires caused by campfires compared to 2019. We are currently down 3 helicopters, 2 Hueys and 1 Bell 407 due to maintenance and repairs during this very, very busy time. We now have 3 Hueys available for fires. Forest rangers have had to respond to numerous rescues due to injured hikers, as noted above in the BPL section. Forest rangers have also helped to keep an eye on Maine state parks and public lands, especially through the busy weekend periods, making an average of 50 visits per week. Rangers look for damage, look at user numbers, illegal parking, and more. And finally, forest rangers have also assisted the Bureau of Agriculture with the distribution of food statewide as part of the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP. Rangers have delivered over 40,000 pounds of food to pantries, nine pallets of which were delivered to the Passamaquoddy and Penobscot tribes, and a tractor-trailer load of approximately 20,000 pounds of food was delivered to Perry and Eastport. So as you can see, there's been a lot of incredible work happening in these 3 bureaus, which also represents a lot of good internal collaboration between all of our bureau directors and their programs as we have looked for ways to work with and maximize our impact with existing resources during an extraordinary time. I also want to highlight that since the pandemic hit Maine, and quite frankly, long before that, our department has made it a priority to work collaboratively with stakeholders across the state. with state legislators of all parties and with the entire Maine congressional delegation. In that spirit, the Bureau of Agriculture has, on an ongoing basis, been actively reaching out to farmers, retailers, distribution companies, and other agricultural stakeholders to assess the emerging short and long-term impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Through these feedback channels, we recognize that financial assistance, personal protection equipment or PPE, labor, worker testing, safe business practices, and market access, among the other issues, are critical areas of concern. And although there have been federal financial assistance programs created as a result of COVID-19 under the CARES Act, these programs have limitations, which I will discuss in more detail in just a bit. And we know that greater help is needed. We have been continuously advocating for the federal government to deliver the relief and legislation that Maine farmers need. Please keep in mind that all of these efforts I will discuss in the remainder of this briefing, as is the case with those I've mentioned before, have happened with existing resources and an already limited budget. But I must say again that I am very proud of our staff, their innovation, and the private and public partnerships that have emerged as we have looked for ways to navigate through the many challenges presented to our communities by COVID-19. So here, it would be helpful if you all have either a print or an electronic copy of the briefing document that we sent along. We'll just walk through this, and then I'm, as I said, happy to answer any questions. Also happy to answer questions along the way. Don't feel like you can't stop me. So just to start out, we broke this up into two sections. We wanted to talk a little bit about our the federal response overview and our response to their response. And then we'll talk a bit about some of the specific priorities that we've been working on. And I would say that when I get to the specific priorities, I keep thinking of things that we didn't include and that we should have, and maybe I'll bring them up along the way. But we've been doing a lot, is what I can say. And so to really put this briefing document together, it was a good exercise because it made us look back over the past few months and say, yeah, we feel like we've been doing a lot because we've been doing a lot. So just to start out, I'm sure you all are aware that the CFAP or Coronavirus Food Assistance Program was launched with funding that was allocated through Congress. What we've unfortunately seen is that all of the programs that have come out of that have largely underserved our farmers and food businesses, at least to the degree that we can measure. Data is more readily available for some programs than others. And so we can just sort of walk through this. I don't plan to read this to you word for word. I think you could probably skim it and get a sense, but I'll just give you the high level overview. And then if you want to spend more time with this document and have additional questions after today, very happy to receive those questions and get answers back to you all. But so the coronavirus or the CFAP program, it basically, it's a $19 billion relief program. It includes $16 billion in direct support to agricultural producers. Some of that is for trade, impacts of trade, so trade mitigation payments, and some of that is meant to be direct to farmers for loss to income due to COVID-19, and that portion is a $9.5 billion appropriation. There's also a $3 billion chunk set aside for the Farmers to Families Food Box Program, which you may also have heard a little bit about. I can say more about that in just a moment. But just high level to say that very overall throughout the country, only about, well, actually, we have some main statistics here. If you look on, I think it's the next page. I might not have the same page numbers of you because mine is printed out in a larger font to make it easier to read. Anyway, if you look at the chart there, it shows you how Maine has received some of the funding as of June 8th, just Monday, as a matter of fact, we've received about $3 million, just over $3 million worth of CFAP funding has flowed to our farmers. And you can see the way that it's broken down in that chart there. A lot of it has gone to dairy, but there has been some that's gone to other sectors as well. Important to note that the funding coming through CFAP, through those direct payment, that direct payment channel is meant to be for Q1 losses. So that's January to April. Of course, a lot of our growers aren't growing in April, and they also don't have product that they store all winter long to sell. So a lot of our farmers are not going to qualify for this funding unless they do another round of funding to cover April forward. We do expect that, we expected that dairy and potatoes would probably qualify and be able to utilize this funding if they needed it. And so it's good to see that dairy is utilizing it. But I will say that the losses to the dairy industry are projected to be vastly larger than this. This is really just a drop in the bucket, what they're able to access at this point in time. And so, as I said, by our assessment, a lot of our farmers are not going to be able to benefit from this particular funding. The food box program was a very, very rapid rollout for that program between when they made available the requirements for how to access that funding and when the deadline was to get applications in. And unfortunately, any of the main distributors that applied were not successful. Maine-based. There are some distributors that applied that were successful. Some of them do that serve Maine or that have Maine in their service area. Some of them are not able to serve Maine because of capacity issues. We're kind of at the end of the line. And for some, the way in which they would get food to us would have taken so long that there were some real food safety concerns. There are some boxes that are being distributed in Maine, but it's very few. So this program also, as it is sort of conceived, is not really going to have a huge impact on either our farmers, because the program is intended to buy product direct from farmers, or on the as we've seen, exponentially rising number of folks here in Maine who are food insecure. So I actually wrote a letter to the Ag Marketing Services Administrator, urging them to reopen the process for applying for those funds, because we really have not, we're really not set up to benefit from it, and we have need. And additionally, I'm really happy to say this, our congressional members, all 4 of our congressional members signed on to a letter of support, supporting our letter. And so that's just a really good example of how we're working well together with our congressional offices. As you've probably heard a lot about the PPP, or Paycheck Protection Program, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Those are 2 programs that came out of the gate pretty quickly that were intended to help in this time of need. And they are helping a lot of people, but unfortunately, as far as PPE goes, we've noted that only 1.2% of all PPP funding in the country has gone to a combined bucket of agriculture, forestry, and fishing sectors. So that's not very much. And it's also been really hard to identify specific data about how that's played out in Maine, but we're still working on it. And also for the EIDL loan program, actually in the first round where money was allocated and spent very quickly, there was a lot of confusion around whether or not farmers agriculture was included in that eligibility. And it wasn't until Congress passed another package of funding that they determined that farmers are eligible, and they actually opened it up for a limited time just to fund farmers to apply. So again, we don't know what the impact of that has been yet. Still too early to tell, I think, but we're monitoring that. And then just additionally, there was a survey done here in Maine by the Beginning Farmer Resource Network back in late April, early May, and it does speak to perhaps an either underutilization or lack of success at being able to access those programs. I'll move on to the next, number 3 here, CARES Act state block grant funding. As you all know, the state has received $1.25 billion in this from this bucket of funding. And like every state, we're trying to inventory and really understand the impact of COVID-19 across all sectors. And that work has been ongoing. And I just have to say that, the governor understands that the need is much greater than that across the state and in all sectors. And she's really pushing for more funding, as well as more flexibility in how to spend that funding. And so as that effort is underway, we've been, as I said, talking with stakeholders, farmers, commodity groups, just across the board, everybody in Maine that we can get information from to understand what the impact has been and what the projected impact will be. And to date, we've put in more than $100 million worth of requests into the pipeline to be considered for CARES Act funding, and approximately $80 million of that is agriculture related. And you can see that I've just given a summary there. Things that we've requested include funds for income loss by farmers, increased costs to farmers due to COVID-19, opportunities to enhance existing programs that purchase from Maine farmers. That includes DACF Senior Farm Share Program, the Mainers Feeding Mainers Program. We've heard from other emergency food providers. We've tried to roll everything into that request that we can. We put in requests for state processing infrastructure grants and loans, and online markets and e-commerce support for farmers and food producers. And there's more. This is just, sort of a high level. And I think these are some of the things that people maybe have talked about most. But there are some other requesting as well. Number 4, state agriculture block grant funding. So Governor Mills has been great champion for this as well. We are looking to the USDA to provide all states across the country with dedicated block grant funding to meet our unique needs, and particularly for states like Maine, who are clearly underserved by the current USDA programs, relief programs. I'm actually really happy to say that the idea for this came from Maine and Vermont, and we gained support with the New England commissioners and took it all the way up to NASDA, the National Association of State Directors of, or National Association of State Directors of or State Departments of Agriculture, sorry, which is sort of like our big advocacy arm for all of the state departments. And they have adopted it, taken it on as a priority, and they're also championing the idea. And so we're getting a lot of support from that direction. Also with our congressional delegation, again, Senator Collins and Senator King are leading sponsors on the Farming Support for States Act, and Congresswoman Pingree is the co-sponsor in the House. So we're hopeful. We don't know when that will be determined, the fate of that will be determined, but it's really hopeful that so many different entities are pulling on our behalf. And then I just wanted to point out, just as we wrap up this summary on federal activity, as I said, we've responded to a number of things along the way, advocating for Maine farmers, Maine agricultural businesses in every way that we can think of. And so both the governor and the department have written a number of letters or signed on to a number of letters in response. The governor urged the USDA to develop strategy to support hunger relief organizations and feed Maine people. This was actually early on, as we knew that the need for support was really skyrocketing, and we actually had a phone call with some of our emergency food providers and really heard the concerns they had, the pressures they were experiencing, and that was the genesis for this letter. Unfortunately, the food box program, which was the predominant activity that came out of the USDA to address food insecurity, has not been helpful. And so then I wrote a follow-up letter letting them know that. And we've also written some letters related to state inspected meat and allowing it to cross state lines so that there isn't so much pressure on our USDA inspected facilities. We know that there's quite a backlog for folks getting their animals processed, and we're trying to figure out how to really resolve that. A letter about dairy relief. This was a letter we signed on to with the New England commissioners as well, who I have to say, I've talked about working well with the congressional delegation, but we've just really enjoyed a great working relationship with other commissioners in New England and in the Northeast. There's a lot of, I think, like-minded thinking here about how we need to move together and work together to do what's best for the region. Another letter that we all signed on to was to Secretary Perdue about the idea of block grant funding, and we also forwarded a number of other ideas that we wanted to be considered. And then finally, the letter that I mentioned previously about just the impact or lack thereof of the food box program on Maine at this time, and asking for that opportunity to be reopened for distributors to apply. And so I'll shift gears here. Do you want me to just keep going and we'll stop at the end?
Let's see if right now for any quick questions, if anybody has, before we get too far along.
Sure.
Anyone have a question so far? I would ask that you kind of touched on it, I believe, in the first one that you just mentioned in 3A about feeding hunger relief here in the state of Maine, and I know that there was a specific question on what the department was doing, and the example they had used was like cooking for community.
Yep.
And is the department supporting programs like that to get hunger relief out to various areas? And in this case, I believe it's like the communities are paying the local farmers, and the farmers, they purchase from local farmers, and the restaurants in the area are then actually cooking the food and getting it to various places.
Yep, that's a great. I know Emily Horton has had a conversation with that organization. Definitely think it's a great program. The CARES Act request that I mentioned, I'm doing this from memory. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but I'm absolutely certain that when we listed a number of different initiatives, Cooking for Community was in there, as was Harvest Bucks and the Farm Fresh Rewards program. And I believe that's also where we put something in that we'd like to see an allocation. There is some sort of an account where there's funding that food service directors can actually get reimbursed for when they purchase from Maine farmers. And I think the allocation's always been pretty low, and the funds get used up right away. So in anticipating that kids will be back in school in the fall and the food service programs will be back in full swing, we think it would be great to see more funding available to schools as well.
All right, great, thank you. Other questions anyone has?
I have a question.
Make sure you turn your mic on.
I have a question for the commissioner. You touched on it a little bit on the state inspection of meat, going across state lines. Along that line, we have a lot of out-of-state livestock coming in. I've heard of several trailer truckloads of hogs, and we know that there's a constant flow coming in, and also fat cattle coming in to be killed, which is backlogging local producers being able to kill their own meat, to supply their own customers. I understand, could you just touch on what you've done with the state slaughterhouses? I believe you're doing something to ramp them up so that we can get rid of this backlog. Can you touch on that at all, Commissioner?
Yep, actually, I'm going to talk about that in the next section when I talk more about what the department priorities have been locally. Do you want me to wait, or do you want me to just jump into that?
Yeah,
That's fine.
Okay.
Representative Pluker, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I was looking at the agricultural block grant funding, and could you give some details as where you think that money might be spent?
Yes, having a little bit of a hard time hearing you,
Did
but
anybody
I get the gist. Where would the block grant funding be spent, or how would it be spent? I think somebody's not on mute. That might be the challenge.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. I don't see anybody that's not on mute.
Yes.
I think it's an echo of me, actually. It's a delay. I don't know how to solve that.
Yes.
I'll just try to ignore it. So the block grant funding, we envision it supporting the similar types of things that we're requesting from the CARES fund. But because the CARES fund, because the block grant fund isn't, it isn't a sure bet. That's why we put in all the requests that we have to the CARES fund as well. If we were successful in getting the block grant funding, we would be able to either supplement what we're asking for from the CARES fund, or perhaps do things that might not be covered by the CARES fund, because there's definitely been some challenges around the guidance that has come from the feds about how the CARES funds can be expended. And I understand that even at times there have been sort of conflicting sets of guidance that folks have had to try to work out. Not in my department, that's not our role, but I understand it's been very, very difficult. And so, but the block grant is really our attempt at trying to get either additional resources or some targeted resources that we can use in ways in which the CARES fund funding can't be used.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Kinney.
Thank you. On the CFAP payments, not a lot of our producers are qualifying. One of the crops that's not listed is maple syrup, and our maple syrup producers got hit hard because we shut down in the middle of maple season. We had tapped what we were going to tap for trees for the year. We had those expenses. They come, and we've lost our ag fairs. We lost Maine Maple Sunday. We've lost our tourist shops that we sell to. So we're definitely going to see a reduction in our prices over the course of the year on our syrup. What has the department been doing trying to help maybe maple producers be able to qualify? Or is the department trying to reach out to the USDA to say, hey, this is a crop that definitely should qualify and we're not even listed?
Yes, so there is an opportunity between now and June 22nd. Actually, I was just on a call about this yesterday, and I'm really glad you brought that up because maple was on my mind. But I was on a call yesterday with NASDA, with the commissioners from all across the country, and there is an opportunity to give feedback to the USDA about those crops that were not included and to make the case for why they need to be. So I think that's something we're excited to work on, and we will definitely be in touch with the Maine Maple Association and look at how we can really make the case for that. So I think that's one thing that we can do. Some of the other things we've been doing is, we've actually had preliminary conversations with the Maine Maple Association about perhaps if there's I know that Maine Maple Sunday was canceled. I was really looking forward to it. I know it was right down to the wire and it got canceled, but there is some talk about doing perhaps a fall, maybe late fall event. We're willing to be helpful in any way that we can with that. That event is actually put on by the Maine Maple Association, but we try to be supportive in any way we can. We're also looking at, I know a lot of maple producers sell at fairs, at agricultural fairs, and a lot of the fairs aren't going to happen this year. So we are really looking at ways that we can help with maybe, online promotion, just helping people to know where they can get these products in lieu of these events not happening. So our team in the Bureau of Agriculture is definitely working on that, thinking a lot about it, and coming up with some, I think, creative ways to try to help.
Representative Kinney, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for mentioning the fall event. I actually was speaking with the president of the Maine Maple Producers Association last week and wondering if in conjunction with this, we've had relaxed rules for maple producers during Maine Maple Sunday weekend to be able to host pancake breakfasts without having to have an additional DHHS license to be able to serve pancakes and stuff. Is that going to be something that the department's going to work to make sure those rules are still relaxed for those producers?
Yes, we'll definitely look into that. Just made note of it.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, just a second, Commissioner. Representative Pluker, it's my understanding that perhaps once you want to ask a question, if you shut off your video when you ask your question, that it may actually enhance the transmission. So, just let me know if you want to ask a question, and there you go. Thank you. Back to you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Great,
So we'll
thank
keep
you.
moving.
Back to you, Commissioner.
There's still an echo in this end. Is there on your end as well?
Yeah, there seems to be a delay when any of us are speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I'll just try to ignore it, but stop me if it gets too distracting. So now we'll move on to the section of the briefing that the heading says Bureau of Agriculture, Food and Rural Resources, COVID-19 Focus and Response. So I'm just going to read this overarching paragraph because I think it sums up really what comes after it. The Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry's agriculture-specific response to COVID-19 has coalesced around a number of particular focus areas. As described below, Bureau of Agriculture, Food and Rural Resources staff moved quickly to be a resource for technical information and guidance to provide consumers and producers needed information on how to operate and interact as a result of the pandemic safely. They also coordinated and communicated regularly with a wide range of stakeholders to understand arising needs, various responses, and to share information and ideas. Further, they prioritized efforts to respond to producer concerns around PPE, worker testing, labor shortages, meat processing bottlenecks, and marketing support. Work continues as they assess potential grant or loan program applicability to help producers adjust to the new COVID-19 landscape. So I think that gives you sort of a sense of how we've been approaching the work. And again, it's been so important for us to hear from people. We've taken in a lot of information, had a lot of conversations, and that work just continues. So the first thing that we did, because we realized there was a great need, we're getting a lot of questions about how do I, can I, that kind of thing. And so we very quickly put together a COVID-19 webpage that we are updating constantly. It's a very dynamic webpage. When anything new comes out about, new funding, new opportunities, new guidance document, it goes there. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that webpage, I would really encourage you to do so. There's just so many hours of work represented in that resource. Also, anytime there's new guidance from the CDC or any federal or state partners, it all goes right there. And I just gave you sort of a snapshot of some of the different types of sector-specific information, numerous technical guidance documents and resources for agricultural businesses that are to be found on that page. And you can see as you scroll down that We've done a lot of guidance documents. In fact, one of the early documents that we did, because as COVID-19, as we were understanding that we were being hit by this pandemic in a way that was going to be really disruptive, we know that agriculture was deemed an essential service. Grocery stores are essential. They still are. They always have been. We've all known that. But we wanted to make sure that the winter farmers markets that were operating knew that they could keep operating and knew how to keep operating in a way that was going to be in keeping with the distancing guidelines and other guidelines that were coming out for retail stores and other spaces, other group or public spaces, and that we were really answering questions that were going to be critical for them to feel confident moving forward and keeping the farmers safe, as well as the customers. And we also saw those as just really critically important points of food access that we did not want to see disrupted. So that was actually the farmers market guidance document, which there's a link to that here. That was one of the early documents that we worked on, but we've gone on from there, making sure that we are addressing all the needs that we can foresee or that are arising. Did a great collaborative guidance document with Cooperative Extension on pick your own operations. And there's a lot there. So again, I would encourage you, and all of these should be live links. If you have the electronic version of this, you should be able to click through. And that goes for previously when I was talking about all the different letters that we've written to the secretary or to AMS or wherever we've sent letters. Those should all be live links in your document. And if they're not working for any reason, please just let us know and we'll get you a fix. Next, I'll talk a little bit about ongoing media and communications. I just have to say kudos to our communications director, Jim Britt, who has been working nonstop, as all of us have, but I've just seen him go in so many different directions and switch gears so quickly and identify not only, opportunities with the press reaching out to us for us to contribute, but him reaching proactively out to the press and saying, hey, you might want to do a story about this, or can you help us get this out into the public, eye and make sure people are hearing about this. And we've seen a lot of traffic on social media. We've been in a lot of different media publications. At the end, or I think as a separate document, perhaps there's, I think, about a 10 or 11 page summary of all the different types of media we've received or generated, and in support of our farmers, and getting the word out that both about what the challenges have been and trying to address those challenges in some ways, and also in just trying to really encourage policymakers, consumers, everyone that we can get the word out to that our farmers are critically important, and please support them in all the ways that you can, and giving different recommendations around that. So that's sort of a summary. We've also really tried to amplify what our other people are doing to support agriculture as well. Have listed some of those folks here: Cooperative Extension, of course, MAFCA, Farm Bureau, Farmland Trust, CEI, on and on and on, and really trying to just make sure all resources are kind of getting out there. We've also done a large number of Gov delivery messages out to folks. That's when people are getting our listserv information. Anytime there are new resources, an update to the significant update to the COVID page, or the COVID-19 resource page, we're just trying to get that information out there. And yeah, I think we've also, actually I should mention, we've also had a number of different meetings with different groups, Zoom meetings, of course. We've kind of detailed that here. And we also, actually, I should mention, pretty quickly, pretty early on, we realized that a lot of different agricultural service provider groups in the state are, out there, they're on the ground, they're hearing things, we were hearing things, and we felt like it would be really a great way, because there was so much happening so quickly to share information. So we started holding a weekly call with ag service providers, also included our co-chairs here, Senator Dill and Representative Hickman, and our congressional offices. And so we've had a lot of really good conversations. Again, at first it was really just to like trade and, you know, share information as quickly as possible or in real time about what was happening, whether it was, you know, with a certain sector of agriculture or, you know, with a bill or federal relief funding, or just trying to make sure that we all were operating with current information. And that morphed somewhat as time went on into talking more about short-term and long-term goals and strategies and ways that we can all work together going forward. So that's been really great. We've just shifted to bi-weekly meetings because we feel like that, you know, everyone's really busy doing their work, but it still feels important to continue sharing. So just wanting to find all the ways that we can to support their work as well as inform us as we go forward. Some other priority activities that I will get to the meat piece, the meat exception topic, but first I'll talk about PPE. We've heard from many different directions that there's been a lot of concern with access to PPE. One of the really, I think innovative things that we've done that not all states have done is we've been looking for ways to partner with other departments within state government. We've been looking for those opportunities, and one arose where we heard that the Department of Corrections at the Maine State Prison, inmates were making cloth face coverings and distributing them to people in need. And so we reached out and said, hey, can we get some of those for our farmers and farm workers? And they said, how many do you want? So we put an initial order of 4,000. I think we've distributed we're getting near to that 1,000, but we've really relied upon, again, our network of ag service providers in the state to get those out and get those into the hands of people who need and want them. We also were able to procure an additional 1,500 free cloth face masks through MEMA that were specifically for USDA and state meat processing facilities. So we've been doing what we can on that front. We'll continue to work on that. The other thing that's been really on people's minds is access to COVID-19 testing for farmers and farm workers. And I think that's gotten a little bit more, especially become more of a concern as some of the immigrant labor, just anticipating what's that going to look like when you have people cohabitating and housing and wanting to make sure that we can test rapidly if there looks like there's any kind of an issue. And so we've been working with DHHS and also working with the Maine Mobile Health Program to try to increase testing capacity. And I think that's going definitely well, going in the right direction. And we're also working with Maine Mobile Health Program on worker guidance and trying to get some clear information out about the testing process so that they know what to expect. And then the custom meat exception, yes. So this was another attempt for us to help solve that bottleneck. We understand that there is a backlog, and so we looked into whether we could possibly allow some of our custom meat processors to be operating in a way that would be equivalent to state inspection. And so we were able to utilize this 90-day exception, and we found 3 different processors, custom processors, who were really in a good position to do this, who were interested, have really good track records with our food safety and inspections staff. And so we've been working with them. We worked again with Cooperative Extension to get their HACCP plans in order and just to make sure that all of the sort of food safety pieces have been addressed. And so we're hoping that works well. We're also hoping that maybe on the other side of this, they may want to continue being inspected facilities and can help to relieve that bottleneck in the long term. But one of the reasons we didn't do more than 3, to be honest, is just capacity. We only have so many inspectors, and they already have pretty full plates, but we felt like we could take on 3, and we're looking at it as kind of a pilot just to see how it goes. And so far, I think it's going quite well.
Before you leave that, Senator, just before a second,
Yep.
Senator Black, did that answer your question you had around the meat?
Yeah, I think so. The other concern I addressed with that was the amount of out-of-state livestock coming in that was, and I'm not sure, I know we need to take care of, there's people that, need the extra food and products, but what's that going to do long-term if it continues to our local producers?
Yeah, I understand. I think that's another one of the reasons why we put in a request or have earmarked, or we know that there's a need for more processing in the state. One of the things that we've seen with this pandemic is, and I think you've all seen it, we've all seen it, is that people are turning to local farms. They're turning to, they want local meat, they want to purchase direct from farmers, or they want to know where they can go to purchase local product. That energy and that interest is still there. And, we've talked a lot about this internally, and we don't think that's going to go away right away. And it's an opportunity in a way for us to really address that need. And, looking at processing bottlenecks, looking at the need for more infrastructure to meet the demand that is here. And I think we'll continue that's a priority. And in fact, that's a priority in the ag service provider group that I talked about previously, when we had more of a long-term discussion about strategies and things that we want to work together on. Processing infrastructure was one of the top priorities. So we've all acknowledged that, and we're going to be talking more about what that looks like as time goes on.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to the next section too, I missed Representative O'Neill. She had wanted to ask a question earlier, and I did miss that. So Representative O'Neill, if you'd like to ask a question.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question going back to, because you had mentioned different staff, and I just was curious how you're handling folks that may not feel safe to come into work, or how that dialogue is going. And so that's kind of part one of my question. And then having worked for the parks, I just was worried about public facing people and what we're doing to protect our staff.
I really appreciate those questions. I'll start with the parks piece, because that was something early on that I was really concerned with too. Those are staff that are out there, public facing, and especially with some of the parks where we were seeing a lot of overuse and just concern for the safety of our staff. And so, we have spent a lot of time listening. There are weekly Teams meetings that go on with park staff. I've been on a number of them, wanting to hear directly from those staff what their concerns are. And I just want to, give great credit to Andy Cutco, the Bureau Director, others, Ron Hunt, Gary Best, and other staff in parks who have worked really hard to make sure that we have the kinds of protocols in place and the kinds of PPE or protective equipment in place, so that the staff feel confident and feel like they have the tools that they need to keep themselves and the public safe. As for staff generally and concerns about coming back into the office, we have been operating for a while now under the idea that if you can do your work from home, do your work from home or do it remotely. As we start to look at people coming back into the building or buildings, we are going to do that very carefully and deliberately. And we won't bring everybody back at once. We'll probably bring, a subset back. If anyone is particularly concerned, has underlying health issues, we will work with them, and it may make sense for them to continue working remotely. We don't know exactly what the trajectory of this virus will be, particularly when we get to the fall months and it starts to move into winter. We just don't know. And so we are trying to be really sensitive to what people's needs are. There are some people who would love to come back into the buildings right away. So we're working on balancing that out. In fact, we're working on policies around that and planning around that right now. As I sort of alluded to it in my opening statement, that's a whole other body of work, and we're definitely taking that really seriously. And we'll have safety protocols in place for anybody that does come back into our buildings, and be really careful and thoughtful about that.
Oh, if I could just respond quickly. I know I'm not in the room, so I can't put my hand up, but I'm glad to hear that. I've heard from folks working in other departments that they've maybe not had the choice of whether they could come in. So I really appreciate hearing that that you're working with people and giving them the option if they don't feel comfortable. And knowing that people are on a spectrum, a lot of people miss the workplace and the structure of that too. So yeah, thank you for thinking about that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think, I can't underestimate, we can't underestimate the fact that we all miss each other. It's not the same having video conference calls. I mean, I just, on that sort of administrative level, we started holding weekly Teams meetings first for, bureau specific, because there were just so many questions and very specific issues that were needing to be talked about. So everybody felt like they had all the information. And now we've moved to a place where we're doing, instead of the bureau specific meetings, we're doing weekly all DACF meetings. So I get on, and actually we just transitioned to bi-weekly because it felt like the information flow is slowing down a little bit and didn't need to be so repetitive. But we're really committed. I think that's something that will continue even beyond this situation. It has felt like a really good way to connect people, just to hear voices and keep that communication going. But it is no substitute for being together in a space in person. I can affirm that.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
I saw you had.
Bill, turn your video.
Timberlake and Black to talk
Bill, turn your video off and see if that helps
concerns.
with the
I was
audio.
wondering if you could give any details to that. I'm probably still have a really bad connection.
Okay, now repeat your question, Bill.
Details to that. I'm probably still really bad.
We're not hearing you. Write your question in the chat. Maybe that will help.
Are you on mute? No. Hey, I could try on this computer.
Okay, try it again, Bill.
Okay, the meeting that you had about migrant labor concerns, Senators Bill, Liak, and Timber. Could you give any details?
You're gonna have to write it down, Bill. We're getting feedback and can't understand you. Sorry.
Maybe if he mutes his computer and then comes back to talk to this one.
That's true. His was on mute.
Take 4. Just looking on details on the migrant labor stuff you talked about with Senators Dill, Timberlake, and Black.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that again. That was really quick.
You had a meeting with Senators Dill, Timberlake, and Black about migrant labor concerns. Could you let us know what you discussed in that meeting?
Yeah. So we did talk. We talked about. Let's see. I'm going to do this from memory, but please, Senator Black, Senator Dill, if you remember more in the moment, let me know. But we did talk about concerns around housing and testing and PPE and what happens if somebody gets sick. What are the options for that? In some places in the state, there actually have been opportunities identified where if somebody becomes ill, they can go and stay in a hotel room. So from that, we took away, an even deeper commitment to working on PPE procurement and working on the testing piece, making sure it's readily available, and looking for opportunities where housing could be addressed if there is a concern. And I know that's, also Nancy McBrady has been working very closely with the Maine Migrant Worker Program on all of these issues. We also, prior, I think we re-emphasized this, but we had clarified prior to that meeting, there were concerns about if migrant labor comes into the state, do they have to quarantine for 14 days? And the answer to that question is no, they don't. They are essential workers. They are working in agriculture. We would recommend that they do if they can, but if they can't, that's where we're trying to make sure that farmers have access to PPE and testing to the degree that will address, those concerns. But Senator Black and Senator Dill, if you remember more than I am remembering in the moment.
I think that pretty well covers it. I think one of the things that we did kind of discuss about the quarantine issue was actually that some of the workers could work, but kind of be quarantined away from other workers so that they were actually coming in and working, but wasn't actually with the other workers.
Right. And yeah, the strategies for, having people that are bunking together, working together, having people sort of remain in teams that don't cross, where you're not mixing things up, just trying to keep folks separate. That was talked about, yes.
I had in terms of trying to increase access to testing for migrant workers, are you mostly working through the Maine Migrant Health Program, or is there other ways to increase that access?
Yeah, that's the way that that's where we're focusing our energy right now. If there need to be other ways, we will certainly explore them. But that seems to be a good partnership, and I know they're working really hard on it.
Great, thank you. If you'd like to continue, we can do that.
Great. I think the next thing I was going to talk about is that we just launched a Farming for Maine labor campaign. This really came out of conversations that we had with folks from the blueberry, dairy, and aquaculture industries who were, they actually came forth and said, hey, this would be really helpful. So we said, great, let's figure out how to do this. Got together with the Department of Labor, put together some materials that are now being disseminated. And as we were talking about creating this campaign, originally it was about the labor shortage due to COVID-19, but then the more we really thought about it, we thought labor's been an issue prior to COVID-19, and we wanted the campaign and the materials that we put together to speak to more than just this moment. So although there's an emphasis on there is a real need for labor now, we really created the materials in a way that talked about, the importance of agriculture in the state, and how these jobs are available, and really encouraging people to look into them. So that's something we launched recently. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback on it, so we're happy that that's been the case. And then with our ag marketing support team, just a number of things here to talk about. Technical support. We've been hearing from folks that they could use help with sort of transitioning to online sales. Some farmers are really adept at that and have jumped right in, but some have asked for support. So we've put together an on-ramp to online sales overview of resources, and a list of advisors that can help people with that kind of transition or launching their online sales. Virtual marketing support, as I mentioned before, we're looking at this for a number of different areas. Just looking for ways. We know that, agritourism, again, we talked about Maine Maple Sunday, the fairs. There are a number of things that we would usually be doing in person that we are looking at how can we have an impact if we get our creative juices flowing and try to do some virtual promotion online. Real Maine, the Real Maine campaign, the logo was at the Ag Trade Show. We revealed it there. One farmer came up to me there and hugged me and said they loved it, which was really a great response. We've had a lot of other great responses to that campaign since. We're really launching, we just started launching it in earnest in the past several weeks, and we have really targeted the messaging for Real Maine to Maine consumers, and go buy from your local farmer. The importance of Maine agriculture again, as we are starting to see ways in which tourism can come into the state. We've also got messaging related to that. But we're really excited about it. We have a website that's going to go live in a few weeks that I think is going to be a great resource for directing people to Maine grown food and Maine agricultural products in general. And so we're excited about that. And I think it's going to be good timing because we're coming into the sort of fullness of the growing season, and we'll have some real energy built up around this as folks are looking to purchase even more food from our farmers. And then I think it's the last thing, I shouldn't say that until I really look ahead. Yeah, it is the last thing I wanted to just touch on in this brief, is that we are looking at ways to use existing resources, things that we already have, to address people's needs on the ground. And some of these opportunities are, before us now, and some of them are going to require maybe your help with some legislative action, and some are things we're thinking about as we roll into fiscal year 2021, because we can look at how we use these programs in the future. But I'll just say the Ag Marketing Loan Fund is one that we're really looking closely at. For those that are unfamiliar with it, it is a program where it funds commercial agricultural enterprises and businesses engaged in the producing, processing, storing, packaging, or marketing of products derived from an agricultural enterprise, with the design, construction, or improvement of commodity and storage buildings and packing and marketing facilities, and the construction, renovation, or acquisition of other property. So it's pretty broad, but it's also highly underutilized. And part of that is because the interest rate is kind of high. And I think, we think that if we focused on some tweaks to that program, it could be a much more desirable tool for folks. And so we're interested in doing that. So that's something that we are planning to bring back to the legislature when you all reconvene at some point. There are agricultural direct technical assistance grants that we are looking at as for an opportunity in fiscal year 2021, partly because funds are already spent out of the account those would come from. But we're thinking that those might be the kind of thing, they can be for up to $7,500. Those might be the kind of thing that farmers really need right now. And so we're looking at how those can be best utilized and deployed for maximum benefit. And then there's the agricultural development grants. We just finished up a round. In fact, we've just made our awards, and I think there's a link here you can click to if you want to see who those funds are awarded to and what kind of projects they're going to be undertaking. There were a total of 11 recipients and a total of 472. That doesn't look right. I need to check that number. Oh yeah, no, it is right. $472,000, almost $473,000 that were awarded. I need to put my glasses on. Clearly, it's gotten to that point. But those are funds that, those applications came in before COVID-19 really took hold, and so they're not necessarily in response to COVID-19, but a lot of the kinds of things that people are looking at are related to marketing and distribution and just ways in which to really get our food out there. So I think that there are benefits that will come from that program, and we'll look at that program with fresh eyes as we come around again in fiscal year 2021. Just thinking, I thought there might have been one other program I was going to talk about, but that's okay. There's also, we have the specialty crop block grants. These are really narrow in scope. And in fact, one of the things that we asked for in a letter with the New England commissioners, I think it was in the letter where we were asking for the block grant from the USDA, through the USDA. We also talked about specialty crop block grants and making them more flexible. So at this time, we're not really sure how we can really maximize these as a resource for folks that are trying to deal with COVID-19 impacts, but we are looking at the restrictions around them and you know, trying to see if there are ways that those can be resolved. So I'll stop there. Again, like I said, actually, maybe I won't stop there. I'll say one more thing. I just wanted to, another thing that I thought of after we put this all together was just some of the innovation in the trying not to let services be interrupted that has been happening. And I just wanted to say one really good example of that is our Board of Pesticides Control program. They had to stop giving in-person exams in February, but knew that that was desperately needed, and we needed to figure out how to move forward and get people certified or recertified. And so they got creative, and they found a way to do the program by having people come and sit in the parking lot in their cars, and they did the entire program, testing everything from their cars. And I have a statement here from Megan Patterson, the director of that program. She said, "We decided to offer exams to applicants in their cars, and on April 21, 2020, we proctored our first exams. Since then, we have proctored 403 exams in the Department of Environmental Protection's lower parking lot on 11 different days. On the days of the exams, we have 4 sessions, 8 and 10 a.m. and 1 and 3 p.m. We have a maximum number of 15 cars per session. The exams are proctored by the staff of the BPC and volunteers from other departments such as plant health. We have given exams in the snow, belting rain, and on beautiful sunny days. The process is going very smoothly." So again, just another good example of how staff have really just tried to innovate and meet the need. So I'll stop there. Again, I know there are some other questions that were asked. I think some of them, as I said, I answered in the body of this briefing, but happy to take any.
Are there other questions? Yes, Representative Keeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You touched briefly on some virtual marketing support for ag fairs, but what has been going on with all of the cancellations of these agricultural fairs? Some of them were hanging on by a thread as it was. How is the association handling a lot of this on the statewide level? And what are we seeing? Are we gonna see an end to our ag fairs because of all of this? Because they rely on these fairs to continue. Some of them are hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, we've been in very, very close touch on this with the Association of Ag Fairs. We've been talking with them all along. We are definitely looking for ways, as I said, to try to help promote some of the types of marketing that would have gone on in person in those venues. As far as the fairs themselves go, we are also talking about looking at how we can support them through sort of an online presence and making sure that people don't, that they're aware of this is the time of the year that the fair happens, and these are all the other ways in which you can celebrate Maine agriculture. We do offer, we actually distribute stipends to the fairs, as you know, and we're looking at, it looks like at this point in time, I think all but maybe 5 fairs have decided to postpone for this year. So one of the things that means is that they won't have the expenses this year, and And also, you know, if none of the fairs happen, the stipends can just roll over to next year and be available. At the same time, we know that, you know, the stipends come from harness racing and casinos, and those are not operating at high capacity, if at all, right now. And so they will be smaller, but we're committed to working with them and trying to figure out, you know, how do we go forward from here. There are no easy answers. I mean, that's been a hard thing, you know. That's, I think, across the state, across all sectors, we're all grappling with this. So we're open to ideas and working closely with the association to see how we can all move forward.
Are there other questions? Representative Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for your briefing. Do we have, or will we be able to get this briefing in digital form for sharing via email?
Yes. Well, you should have the body of the briefing that I just went through. We'll provide you my opening remarks. We can actually just put it all into one document for you, and so that you can share it as widely as you would like.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I know the commissioner wants to make some closing remarks, but before I think we do that, I'd like to turn it over to Dean Carter and have her presentation on extension and what they're doing, and also her role with the task force subcommittee that she's on. So with that, Dean Carter.
Thank you so much. Senator Dill, Representative Hickman, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. My name is Hannah Carter, and I am Dean of the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, which has played an important role in supporting Maine agriculture throughout this pandemic. On a personal note, I am the daughter of a potato farmer from Washburn, Maine, and when Representative McCray said he was looking forward to getting out of the county, I'm looking forward to actually coming back to visit the county because I haven't been there, I think, since February. And so it's on my to-do list in the next couple of weeks is to head up north, and I'm greatly looking forward to doing so. On behalf of UMaine, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you examples of our efforts, of our collaborations with the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, and our priorities as we move forward to continue to support the people and the industries and communities that rely on Maine agriculture. It is truly an honor to address you all today, and I'm grateful for the agenda time and your interest in hearing Extension's response to this unprecedented time. I think it's important to have a little bit of a history lesson, and I'm not usually a history buff, but it's as we have moved forward through this pandemic, I just think it's important to note that during another time of crisis, President Abraham Lincoln signed into law the Morrill Act of 1862. This act began to fund educational institutions by granting federally controlled land that states could then sell in order to raise the necessary funds to establish land-grant colleges, whose missions were to focus on the teaching of agriculture, military science, and engineering to the children of the citizens of that state. The University of Maine was established shortly after in 1865 and holds the distinction, this is a fun fact for the day, of being one of only 2 land, sea, and space grant institutions in this country. The land grants have 3 key components which still stand today: as a public institution by providing education to the citizens of the state, as a research institution, which began with the Hatch Act of 1887, which established the agriculture experiment stations, and finally, as a service institution, which was set forth by the Smith-Lever Act of 1914 and the establishment of the Cooperative Extension Service, whose function was to disseminate the information from research conducted by the experiment stations and from the main campus. Extension's funding structures reflect their mission as our budget is derived from local governments, state government, and federal government. So for about 100 years, the University of Maine Cooperative Extension has been putting university research to work in the homes, businesses, farms, and communities in every corner of this state. Service is certainly core to our mission, and while our primary mode of conducting our extension programs has been in-person delivery, COVID-19 also caused us to pivot, as we had to move our educational programs online, determine new protocols for providing our services, such as tick, plant disease, and pest identification, and as the commissioner stated, become adept at these new modes of communication. Because of our connections and relationships within communities, we were able to immediately begin to address the needs caused by COVID-19. When the restaurants in southern Maine and all over the state shut down and producers were left with greenhouses and refrigerators full of product, a cheesemaker named Allison Lakin of Lakin's Gorge's Cheeses had an idea to start an online form that producers could access, indicate what products they had available, and how to access these products while following physical distancing requirements. But what she needed was a centralized online platforms, and it was talking to one of our extension staff who said, we can do that. And they did. And with that, I'm sure many of you hopefully are either a part of or have utilized the Maine Farms and Seafood Directory. To date, 466 farms all across the state are participating, and the directory has been viewed over 1 million times. That's our last week's data. We know this week it will have gone up, but I think about that. 1 million times folks have accessed this directory. Early into this work, I actually had a producer call me on the phone and in dead seriousness said, do not screw this up. We are having one of the best springs that we've ever had. This is because of the direct connection between customer and farmer. And this directory has certainly been part of the broader conservations that the department has hosted, as the commissioner mentioned, with other ag service providers in regards to not only supporting Maine agriculture, but also to increase capacity to meet greater needs, which has become evident in this crisis, such as food insecurity, infrastructure, and processing. And we also will share these remarks with you all, and we have links to the directory. And unbeknownst to us, a marketing firm out of South Portland decided pro bono to do a video of this effort. And we've also included a link to the video because it's extremely well done and tells a wonderful story of, I believe, the can-do nature of Maine agriculture. We are also proud, very proud, to have played a supporting role in the department's fast tracking of the 3 custom butcher processing operations that the commissioner mentioned. Our food safety faculty have provided assistance in coordinating and reviewing the food safety plans of these 3 entities. And again, just provides a crystal clear example of, as I mentioned before, bringing the resources of the university where they're needed most through research and through our faculty expertise. As evidenced by this hearing that's being held remotely and with technology, we are also utilizing new methods for communication and connection. Within a week of us all working remotely, as we mirrored everybody else in March, I will not forget, on March 12th, I was actually with you all in the state legislature for our Board of Ag meeting. And I believe the governor announced the first case that afternoon. And it seemed like on March 13th, we were starting this pivot of moving to remote working. And we did the same thing in extension. We were participants of the ag service and still are participants of the weekly ag service provider call, which was invaluable at the time to share information, to ask questions, and really to collaborate on potential solutions to address these needs. One of our faculty members also initiated a weekly farmer Zoom call, which was an opportunity for farmers to gather to do the same. And what I love about it was, at first people are like, well, will people even participate? Do people know how to use Zoom? And so again, we did a lot of walkthroughs, a lot of one-on-one coaching and talking with folks to make them comfortable with this technology. And we're very proud that of the 17 weeks that we held weekly farmer Zoom calls, we had over 370 participants. Many of you have participated on those calls, and we really appreciate that. Commissioner Beal and Bureau Director McBrady were our featured guests during one of them. Also was Senator Collins and Representative Pingree, and it just made a wonderful opportunity for folks to connect and again, ask those questions and share in conversations. These calls gave us the opportunity to hear directly from farmers and industry representatives and the opportunity to provide short-term solutions to the problems, and similarly, an opportunity for policymakers and ag leaders like those from our congressional delegation and the department to share information and actionable outcomes. Examples include sourcing of PPE, farm stand safety protocols, labor issues, how to navigate the federal relief programs, and many more. I was thinking about this, and I believe that both Extension and the department acted like hospital triage units. What could the department assist with? What could Extension assist with? And what other sources of help could we find to address the needs, whether at the federal, state, or local levels? I believe there will be opportunities for this committee to play a role in addressing these questions and needs, as well as certainly mid to long-term needs have been identified that we will all need to work together on, such as infrastructure, processing, regulations. And again, the commissioner did a wonderful job outlining these long-term needs. Interestingly, and I'm sure you all have seen this as well, back in your local communities, there has been a phenomenal increased interest in growing your own food, in preserving the harvest of local food that you may find through your local farmers markets, through the online directory. In fact, we developed an online web series entitled Preserving the Harvest. And when we announced this on social media, again, we had over 66,000 hits showing interest in this series. We, meaning all of us, Extension, the department, and this committee need to capitalize on this interest to ensure that it becomes part of the norm of our clients and our constituents, not the one-time response to this pandemic. And while the Maine food system is one of our primary focus areas, as many of you know, our other focus is the Maine 4-H program. Again, our traditional ways of conducting our 4-H programs have also had to be reimagined and recreated. Because of this, many more youth are participating in our online 4-H programs and offerings. In addition, we are working with faculty across the university and the system to engage them in these outreach activities. One example of this is our 4-H quarantine virtual science cafes, which connect high school students and expert researchers to inspire youth to think about careers in agriculture and in the sciences. And again, I echo the commissioner's comments. Across the board, our extension faculty and staff have been creative, they've been innovative, and they've really done an extraordinary job at connecting, again, what folks need, seeing where they're at, and really being creative and working across, again, whether it's units within Extension, units across campus, or units across the system to develop and deliver these programs. There are positives in pandemics, and I think it's important to highlight those and to remember those. As I mentioned before, some producers have had their best early season sales. I don't know about you, but some seedlings are sold out across the state. I don't know if you have noticed that there's an onion shortage. At least there's one here in Penobscot County. But again, it's that interest in backyard gardening. We do know, though, that certainly some farmers have faced serious disruptions to their operations. Those who have been able to pivot to direct sales, to make crop changes, and to work with customers to address concerns have certainly fared very well. People are really thinking about where their food comes from. They are establishing relationships with their local farmer, and they are spending more time intentionally as a family. I'm hopeful these trends continue as we begin our new normal, what life looks like after COVID-19. I believe that together with the department, we need to focus on marketing and promotion of Maine ag products. We need to invest in food and agricultural innovations. We need to increase our efforts around nutrition and food insecurity, and we need to coordinate our efforts to address some of the larger issues that I've stated before, such as infrastructure and processing. Currently, I'm playing a supporting role to the Manufacturing and Natural Resource-Based Industries Subcommittee of the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee. Food, fisheries, and forestry are all falling under this natural resource-based industry umbrella. And infrastructure needs are a common denominator between all sections of the work of this committee. And I believe these concerted efforts will develop concrete recommendations that will serve to truly address the issues that limit our ability to increase the economic impact of these industries in this state. The short and long-term recommendations of this committee will help inform our work, the work of the department, of this committee, and of the state. Extension has always felt like we were the best kept secret at UMaine. We can't say that anymore, and I'm pretty proud of that. Because of the great work that was done throughout COVID-19, people both within UMaine and outside of our organization know about Extension. This is both a blessing and a curse. The curse being that our efforts have led to greater expectations of new programs, new ways to engage the public, and an increased need to expand the capacity of many of our facilities and programs. This comes, as you all know, at a time of decreased budgets at the University of Maine, the University of Maine system, and the state. We are garnering support for the federal legislation sponsored by Senator Collins and King, as the commissioner mentioned before, the Farming Support for States Act, as it could possibly provide additional funds as well to Extension, and certainly it will be a benefit to all of Maine agriculture. My prepared remarks this morning only capture a fraction of Extension's efforts to respond to this pandemic. From providing dozens of free online learning opportunities to Maine students and their families, to continuing to provide our tick testing and plant and pest identification services, to distributing food from our 4-H camps and learning centers, to actually helping a group of 4-Hers who wanted to do something about the food insecurity needs in their communities. And this group of 3 4-Hers raised and processed chickens for their local food pantries, to donating hundreds of face masks that were lovingly stitched by our Extension Homemakers group. Extension has had a meaningful statewide impact consistent with the University of Maine system's leadership in response to this global pandemic. While we are over 100 years old, Extension systems across this country could not be more relevant than they are today. And we would not be here if it weren't for the investment of the state of Maine and the work that you all do to advocate, invest, and promote our organization. And for that, I thank you. I also just want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you all today. And I'm certainly pleased to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Very much appreciated. Anyone have any questions? Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one kind of comes personal. My daughter is one that participates in 4-H programs, and she does, sorry, this mask is too close. She does horse shows. And one of the things she keeps saying is it's so easy for us to physically distance because we're sitting on this horse, we're running around in a 60 by 120 foot arena. We hang out at our own horse trailer in between events. Is there any possibility of trying to help these 4-Hers that rely on those shows to keep themselves going? Some of these kids can't ride their horses because the barns aren't available or anything. My daughter's lucky because our horses are on our farm and she's got 350 acres that she can run around on. But not all kids are. Some of them really need that interaction, and these are kids that really need that interaction. And what is being done to help some of these other programs like the horse shows that usually happen at ag fairs?
Oh, Representative Kinney, this is personal to me because I am a former crazy 4-H horse girl. So I spent 11 years as participating in 4-H in my local horse club and at Eastern States for 3 years. And so I get it completely. And I'm going to respond to these questions in 2 parts. So first of all, this has been, as Commissioner Beal mentioned too, I feel like there has been we're not making it up as we go along, but certainly nobody's done this before. So we're figuring this out as we go along. And one of the things, and some folks they think about 4-H and Extension that stands alone out here, and the university can be over here doing their thing. You know, they're teaching students and whatnot, but and I always say we're over here doing the real important work around the state, not to take anything away from the work that's done on main campus. But we do follow the guidelines because we are part of the University of Maine. We follow the guidelines of the University of Maine system and then the guidelines of the University of Maine. And so it's been really interesting because I use your daughter as an example. Your daughter, who participates in her 4-H program, is with a horse project, is one of our 4-Hers. And so we have to make guidelines for our 4-H program as a whole, realizing that some of those guidelines as a whole really don't apply well to specific sets of our program. As you just said, we can physically distance really well on a horse. And so what we're trying to do, and we have been given some latitude to figure this out of what makes best sense for our programs, meaning 4-H. And so what we're doing is taking the guidelines that we get from the system and from the University of Maine and asking, can we make some exceptions to these? Again, showing proper safety protocols. There's a process to this. And so what we are trying to do, and we're having those very conversations right now, is think about how do we salvage the summers for some of these kids? And that's what you're asking about, is how do we make it with fairs closing and not having those opportunities, what can we do? And so I just say, and I understand probably frustrations in this because I get frustrated when people say this to me, is I keep saying, stay tuned, because hopefully we will have some guidance coming out in the next few weeks that may address some of these concerns. But I do appreciate your question. And again, personally, I feel for her because I know how important those opportunities were for me as a youth as well.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions for Dean Carter? Seeing none, thank you very much, Dr. Carter.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it back to Commissioner Beal for her closing remarks.
Thank you so much. So in closing, I want to say that I hope that this briefing that the department has provided, it's provided useful technical information to the committee, and it's also served to shine a light on how our 4 bureaus have stepped up to support one another and how other state agencies have worked alongside one another during this unprecedented time. And I also want to reiterate that throughout all of these activities, DACF has made a deliberate effort to regularly engage with stakeholders in the agricultural and legislative arenas to stay up to date and share information. When the pandemic first hit, our policy director, Emily Horton, began sharing regular updates with the ACF committee. And we've continued to answer and make time for any legislative question or meeting that has arisen. And I'm proud that our department continues to have a good working relationship with our committee, as this is how we will continue to get critical work done for the people of Maine, by working together. Senator Dill, I think it was in an email leading up to this, you said, you posed the question, how can the committee help? How can the committee help us and help the work that we're doing? So I did come with a few ideas that I'll just leave with you to think about and mull over, and we can certainly talk more about these either today or at another time. But I think first and foremost, I'll state the obvious, that it will be very helpful for the committee to support and advocate for the budgetary items that we bring forth during the next biennial budget process. As you know, due to the supplemental budget having not been able to move forward as planned, your continued support for any DACF biennial budget requests will be all the more critical. And just to make the point that, you know, relief funding, although we're fighting for it, it always comes late in the game. And our best insurance in the long run in being able to help our farmers and the broader agricultural community in a time of need is for us to have the capacity to act. And, you know, I think, as we've said before, you know, that we at times struggle with capacity even in normal times. And so when something like a global pandemic hits, it definitely tests all systems. And I have to say how proud I am of our staff for just stepping up and going full tilt day after day. And I also just want to reiterate the point that we've talked about, that, because COVID-19 has made so clear the importance of further infrastructure investment and the need for that, and enhanced marketing, and the need for greater technical assistance, that we really need to be looking at this all together as we go forward in order to be successful. And also to say that the support for the Ag Marketing Loan Fund changes that I mentioned earlier, that is something that you can expect that we'll come back around with and want to have more discussion with you all about, and looking at how we can make that a better program for farmers. And also another request is, I think I might have touched on this briefly, or maybe I didn't, but we have had a survey out to farmers and foresters, folks in the farming and forestry industries. It's a survey that we put together collaboratively between the Bureau of Agriculture and Forestry. And we have been soliciting input, about what kind of impacts have folks felt because of COVID-19, what kind of resources do they need, information, gaps that we can help to fill. So that's really helped us to design our response. And it's also given us an opportunity to be able to reach out directly to people and offer them information and guidance in ways that we can, that are helpful to them in their business and solving their problems, or challenges that they're facing. So if you would help us to keep promoting that opportunity to give us feedback, we'll make sure that that link is live and in this document that you have before you, but and we'll send an updated document after this call. And then finally, I want to say that we really want you to continue to share your ideas with us. You're seeing things on the ground that are really helpful for us to hear about. And your experience, your perspective is really, really important to us. And we just hope that you'll continue to be in touch and share any questions, concerns, and ideas that you have for how we can be most effective. So thank you for all of your support for our work, and be healthy. And it's great to see you all.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will ask if there are any final burning questions that anyone has. Senator Black is wiggling in his chair in front of me and it's squeaking, so we'll see what his question is and whether I can let him go ahead with it. So,
Thank you, Chairman Dill. I know we've been talking about ag mostly here today, but I was wondering if Chairman Dill, if I could divert to forestry, parks and public lands just for a second.
I guess I would ask the commissioner if she's willing to answer a question on forestry.
I'm willing to try.
Okay.
We prepared mostly for agriculture today, but if I don't have the answer, I will get it to you.
And that was the game plan, but we will see what you ask.
Realizing that, and I know that you have a very capable director of forestry in and Director Patty Cormier. I know she's doing a great job, but you touched on it briefly earlier, how the COVID-19 virus had impacted the mills and also the explosion at not Verso, but Pixtel now. And since that time, we have seen a downward spiral from in pulp and fiber prices. Hardwood alone is down over $10 a cord. Locally, in some places, it's down as much as a third if you're, away from the mills for the price that they're being paid. And I was just wondering what was being done to help loggers in this crisis. I mean, there's a very, very huge there's a surplus of pulp and because of the COVID-19, and also how that's affecting logging on our state-owned lands and parks and public lands, whether we will continue to harvest at the current levels we did before, or whether we'll step them up. And I know that Director Cormier probably could answer these questions better, but I thought it would be nice that we all could hear, what was going on. So if there's any of
Yeah.
that you can answer or get the information to us, I would appreciate it.
Yes, I mean, I do think a more in-depth answer would be good for us to be able to send to you. And I will work with Director Cormier, and I agree with you that she is she's doing a great job. We're really lucky to have her in that role. So we're watching. We're definitely concerned about what the market impacts might be. We've also been talking with Forestry folks about COVID-19 impacts to the markets, aside from the situation with the J Mill, and we know that there are impacts. We're working to quantify those as well. We are looking at whether there are opportunities for relief funding for that sector. I think what has happened with the J Mill has just really heightened the concerns around what might happen there eventually. And yes, we have a stake in it as well, as I mentioned, with our public lands, and that we do harvest timber to help to support our public lands and help to support the staff that work in that department. And so we're really invested. We're really concerned. I know the governor is very, very concerned, is watching closely as well. And we are looking for ways to support folks in that industry in any way that we can, but we'll get a more fulsome answer back to the committee once I have a chance to relay that with Commissioner or Director Cormier.
Thank you, Commissioner Bill.
Representative Kinney has a final question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to touch on a little bit on the blueberry industry. If you've heard much for concerns that the pandemic has had on blueberries and what impact that it may be having on the processing facilities. And then a completely different avenue here. Just curious on the state parks, what are some of the recommendations as far as maybe gatherings of 50 people? If there were groups that wanted to go, and I've had a group that would like to do a small reunion for a high school reunion thing this summer. They've postponed the big reunion to next year, but they had a small group that wanted to get together and maybe go to like Rang Pond State Park or something.
Yeah, so I'll start with the blueberry industry. So yes, we've been in touch with the blueberry industry. We know there are various concerns there. One being around migrant worker health and housing and all of the things that we talked about earlier. Every kind of processing facility has had to look at modifications and ways to have people working in spaces safely, modifications in distancing, things like that. It's been a challenge. It's definitely been a challenge. I think there's an expectation that there will also be an economic impact there as well. And so we're just continuing to be in conversation with them. Labor was another need, clearly, because they had stepped forward and asked us to help with really getting the word out about labor. So a lot of different layers there. We're in touch with them quite frequently, and we'll continue to look for ways to support that industry specifically, as well as all sectors of agriculture. For parks, the guidance on people gathering in parks, that's a great question. I would like to check in with our park staff and see if they have devised guidance around that. I don't recall seeing it in the last couple of days. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So why don't I look into that? And if that has been put together, we'll get it right out to you.
Thank you very much. I'd appreciate that.
Seeing no other further questions, I would ask my co-chair, Representative Hickman, if you'd like to say anything at all today for the...
I just appreciate the briefing from the commissioner and the work that the department has been doing throughout the beginning of this pandemic. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate moving forward. Thank you.
And I want to thank certainly the commissioner and the dean for their presentations today and taking the time to be with us. I also want to thank the committee. All 13 members were present, which is probably the first time since the first day, back 2 years ago when we were all together at one time. And I especially want to thank the committee members for their willingness to wear masks during this. It's much appreciated. And so with that, seeing no other questions or anything, again, thank you both and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
You too. Bye, guys.
Take care, everybody.